A gunshot shattered the fog behind a rural clinic at 2 a.m. A wounded
Help me!
stranger collapsed at a nurse's
I
feet.
need assistance right
She
now.
had one choice.
Somebody help!
Run or step in front of the bullet. By morning, the man was gone. No cameras. No blood. No record he ever existed. Police said she imagined it. Doctors told her to rest. But someone cleaned the scene. And someone powerful wanted that night erased. Because the man she saved wasn't just bleeding, he was carrying something dangerous. And her mistake was surviving. So why did 12 men later salute her in silence and drive away like nothing ever happened? Welcome my beautiful family and friends to my YouTube channel. Please click on subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. Now back to the story. The clinic was never meant to be awake at that hour. At 2 a.m., it existed in a kind of suspended state. Lights on, but dimmed. Machines humming softly, but with no urgency. The kind of place where time slowed down and stretched thin, where minutes felt heavier than they should. Outside, the highway had gone quiet. No engines. No voices. Just fog rolling low over cracked asphalt like something alive and patient. Teresa Williams had just clocked out. She was 28, exhausted in the specific way only night shift workers understand, the kind that settles behind the eyes and hums in your bones. She pulled her jacket over her scrubs, tugged the hood up, and waved a tired goodbye to the receptionist slumped behind the desk. Another shift done. Another night survived. The clinic sat just off a forgotten stretch of road, tucked behind a truck stop and a line of old warehouses most people avoided after dark. Teresa had heard the stories. Missing cargo, bad cell service, things better left alone, but stories didn't feed her cat or pay her rent. She took the back road every night. 10 minutes shorter. Always empty. Always quiet. Too quiet. As she stepped outside, the cold hit her first. Then the silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was thick. Heavy. Like the world had leaned in close and stopped breathing. Her car waited at the far edge of the lot. Beyond it, the narrow road disappeared into fog, curling between warehouse shadows. Teresa adjusted the strap of her bag and started walking. Gravel crunched beneath her sneakers. The sound felt too loud. Halfway to her car, she heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A dull thud, followed by a sharp, strained grunt. Then the unmistakable clatter of metal hitting pavement. Teresa stopped. Every instinct she had, every long night in emergency rooms, every moment spent reading bodies instead of charts, told her this wasn't nothing. Her hand slid into her pocket, fingers closing around her phone. She turned slowly toward the alley between two warehouses. The fog shifted. A man stumbled out of it. He barely made it 3 steps before collapsing face first near the road. His body hit the ground hard, like it had already given up. For one frozen heartbeat, Teresa stayed where she was. This was the moment where people looked away, where they told themselves someone else would handle it, where fear won. Then she ran. "Sir," she called, dropping to her knees beside him. "Hey, can you hear me?" Up close, the damage was impossible to miss. His jacket was soaked through, darker in places where rain couldn't explain it. Blood. Too much of it. The fabric was torn, the sleeve shredded like it had been dragged across concrete. His hands trembled weakly, clutching something wrapped tightly in cloth against his chest, as if letting go would mean dying. "I'm a nurse," Teresa said, her voice low but steady, the way it always was in emergencies. "You're okay. Stay with me." She reached for her phone, fingers shaking now as adrenaline surged. She had just unlocked the screen when the night exploded. The gunshot was sharp and close, louder than she thought a single sound could be. It cracked through the fog like a whip. Pain slammed into her from behind. Something hot tore through the back of her thigh, stealing her breath and dropping her instantly to the pavement. She screamed, raw, uncontrolled, as her phone flew from her hand and skidded across the road. For a split second, the world dissolved into sensation. Fire in her leg, gravel biting into her palms, the metallic taste of panic flooding her mouth. She saw no one. Just fog. Warehouse walls. Shadows that didn't move. The shooter never revealed themselves. Somewhere behind her, the wounded man stirred. His breathing was shallow, wet. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear. One of his hands reached out, fingers brushing her sleeve. Teresa didn't think. She dragged herself forward, every movement tearing through muscle and nerve, and positioned her body over his, shielding him. The way she'd been trained to shield patients from falling equipment, from chaos, from harm. Only this time, the threat was real and armed and close. Another second passed. Then another. No second shot came. The fog swallowed everything again. By the time sirens arrived, called by a trucker who'd heard her scream, the alley was empty. No footprints. No shell casings. No blood trail leading away. Just Teresa. Bleeding. Shaking. Alone on the pavement. The man was gone. Hours later, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Teresa lay in a hospital bed, her leg wrapped tight, pain dulled but not erased. A deputy stood at the foot of the bed, notebook in hand, eyes already tired of this story. There was a man, Teresa said. Not for the first time. He was bleeding. He was shot. I tried to protect him. The deputy flipped a page. We searched the area. He collapsed right in front of me. No sign of a second person. I got shot, she snapped, voice cracking. I didn't imagine that. He nodded, the way people do when they're humoring you. Cameras were down. No witnesses. Your coworkers said you'd worked a double shift. The words landed heavier than the bullet ever had. You're saying I imagined him? I'm saying there's no evidence, the deputy replied calmly. Without that, there's not much we can do. When they left, the room felt colder. By morning, the story had already hardened into something official and clean. A lone nurse injured near abandoned warehouses. No suspect. No second victim. Case closed. But Teresa knew better. She could still feel the weight of that man's blood on her hands. Still hear the gunshot echoing in her skull. Still see the way he clutched whatever was under that cloth like it was worth dying for. Someone had been there. Someone had been erased. And the most terrifying part wasn't the unseen shooter. It was how easily the world accepted that he never existed. Not the bullet. Not the fog. Not the blood. The real danger had just revealed itself. A system that could make a human being disappear and make anyone who spoke up sound crazy for noticing. If you believe helping a stranger should never be punished, hit subscribe. Silence depends on people doing nothing. Morning didn't bring clarity. It brought paperwork. Teresa woke to the soft hiss of oxygen and the smell of antiseptic, her leg elevated, wrapped tight in white gauze that felt too clean for what had happened. Sunlight leaked through half-closed blinds, cutting pale stripes across the wall. The world looked normal again. Too normal. That was the first warning. A police deputy stood near the foot of her bed, flipping through a small notebook like he'd already decided how this story ended. He didn't sit. Didn't rush. His posture said this was routine. Let's go over it one more time, he said. Teresa swallowed. Her throat felt raw, scraped thin by hours of repeating the same sentence in different ways, hoping one version would finally sound real enough. There was a man, she said. He collapsed. He was bleeding badly. I was trying to call it in when I got shot. The deputy nodded, pen hovering. And you're sure you saw him? She stared at him. I held him. Another nod. A note scribbled down. Then the words that would start to hollow everything out. We canvassed the area. There's no blood where you described. No drag marks. No shell casing. No second victim. Teresa pushed herself up slightly, pain flaring down her leg. That doesn't mean he wasn't there. It means we can't confirm he was, the deputy replied, calm as weather. The cameras on the warehouses were down. The clinic's exterior cam hasn't been operational for weeks. Her chest tightened. So, there's just nothing? She asked. He closed the notebook. At this time, yes. When he left, the room felt louder without him. The monitor beeped steadily, indifferent. Teresa lay back and stared at the ceiling, replaying the night frame by frame, afraid that if she stopped, the details would slip away, like that man had. Later, a doctor came in. Mid-40s. Kind eyes. A voice trained to soothe. "You're very lucky," he said, checking her chart. The bullet missed the bone. Clean trajectory. "Lucky," she echoed. He smiled gently. "Trauma can do strange things to memory." The word landed wrong. "Strange things like what?" she asked. "Disorientation. Gaps. The brain tries to protect itself." He hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. "Your coworkers mentioned you'd worked several long shifts. Sleep deprivation can amplify." "I didn't imagine a man bleeding out," Teresa cut in. Her voice shook despite her effort. "I didn't imagine getting shot." "No one's saying that," he replied quickly. "Just that the context may be blurred." Blurred. That afternoon, a nurse she recognized from the clinic stopped by. She brought flowers and a careful smile. "You scared us," the nurse said, setting the bouquet down. "We heard what happened." Teresa searched her face. "You believe me, right?" The smile faltered. "Just slightly." "I believe you went through something traumatic," the nurse said. "But the police, well, they didn't find anyone else." The words stacked up, one on top of another, until they formed a wall. No evidence. No witnesses. No blood. No man. By the end of the day, the story had been rewritten without her consent. It lived in clipped sentences and official language. A lone nurse injured near abandoned warehouses. No suspects. No second party involved. Case closed. Teresa lay awake that night, staring into the dimness as the hospital settled into its own version of silence. Every creak of the hallway made her tense. Every footstep sounded like someone coming to tell her she was wrong again. She pressed her fingers into the mattress, grounding herself in sensation. Pain radiated from her leg, sharp, undeniable. Bullets left marks. Bandages didn't lie. Trauma nurses didn't confuse blood with rain. And yet, the world around her was slowly agreeing that she had. The next morning, another deputy came. Different face. Same questions. This time, his tone was firmer. "Is it possible," he asked, "that you misinterpreted the situation?" "No." "That you saw someone fall, panicked, and the rest filled itself in?" "No." "That the shot you heard came from somewhere else?" "I felt it tear through my leg," she said through clenched teeth. He sighed. "Without corroboration, there's not much we can pursue." There it was again. That word. Corroboration. As if truth required permission. After he left, Teresa noticed something that made her sit up despite the pain. Her phone lay on the bedside table, cracked screen dark. She picked it up and scrolled. No outgoing call to emergency services. She remembered unlocking it. Remembered her finger hovering over the screen. Remembered the gunshot. The call never logged. Her stomach dropped. Someone had taken her phone before the ambulance arrived. Someone had turned it off. Someone had put it back. The realization crawled up her spine slowly, deliberately. The scene hadn't just been empty when the police arrived. It had been cleaned. Over the next few days, the pressure grew subtler but heavier. Staff spoke to her more slowly, explained things she already understood, asked how she was feeling in that careful tone reserved for people who might break. A social worker stopped by, clipboard in hand. "Have you ever experienced dissociative episodes before?" she asked. Teresa laughed once, sharp and humorless. "No." "What about vivid dreams?" "I was awake." Flashbacks. "I was bleeding." The questions kept coming, each one nudging the narrative further away from violence and closer to imagination. Every answer she gave seemed to be filed away as another symptom, another reason to doubt her. The worst part wasn't the questions. It was the smiles. Polite. Sympathetic. Closed. They all agreed on one thing. It would be best if she rested. If she stopped thinking about it. If she let it go. Move on. That phrase followed her like a shadow. But Teresa couldn't move on from the weight of that man's hand on her sleeve. From the way his fingers trembled, desperate not to drop whatever he was protecting. From the silence that followed the gunshot. Too clean, too final. If there had been chaos, she could have believed it was confusion. But there wasn't. There was order. No blood where blood should have pooled. No shell casing where one should have fallen. No camera footage where lenses should have seen. Absence that precise didn't happen by accident. One evening, as rain streaked the window and the hallway lights dimmed for night shift, Teresa overheard two staff members outside her door. "Poor thing," one whispered. "Shock can really mess with people." "I just hope she doesn't fixate on it," the other replied. "That's how it gets worse." Teresa closed her eyes. They weren't talking about healing. They were talking about containment, about smoothing the edges, about making the story manageable, about keeping whatever had happened from spilling into places it didn't belong. Someone, somewhere, had decided that a bleeding stranger was inconvenient, and someone else had made him disappear. By the end of the week, the official version of events was everywhere. In reports, in charts, in hushed conversations that stopped when she entered the room. She was the only variable that didn't fit. That made her the problem. And that's when she understood the real threat. Not the gunman in the fog, but the quiet, coordinated insistence that nothing had happened at all. An unseen network didn't need to threaten her. Didn't need to show its face. It just had to let the system do what it always did best. Doubt the victim. Protect the silence. Rewrite reality. Teresa stared at the bandage on her leg, at the wound everyone agreed was real, and felt something settle in her chest. If they could erase him this easily, what else had they erased before? And how many people had been told the same thing she was being told now? That they were tired. That they were mistaken. That they should move on. If you hate when victims are gaslit and told to move on, comment "I believe her." Every comment is a refusal to let silence win. The doubt didn't break Teresa. It sharpened her. What unsettled her wasn't the pain in her leg or the whispers in the hallway. It was the certainty, deep and immovable, that the world was lying to her with remarkable coordination. And when systems lie smoothly, it's because they've done it before. She wasn't the only one who felt it. Benny did too. He came by that afternoon with gas station coffee and a look on his face that didn't belong in a hospital room. He tried to hide it, setting the cup down carefully, cracking a joke about hospital food. But Teresa had spent years reading people in crisis. She knew when someone was carrying something heavy. "They think I imagined it," she said quietly. Benny didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in the plastic chair and stared at the wall like he was watching something play out in his head. "What if you didn't?" he said finally. She looked at him. "What if," he continued, lowering his voice, "this wasn't random? That was all it took." Benny wasn't law enforcement. He wasn't trained. He didn't have authority or access. But he had something just as dangerous: time, curiosity, and no reason to stop asking questions. That night, while Teresa lay awake listening to machines breathe for her, Benny went to work. He worked nights at a convenience store off the highway, the kind of place truckers drifted into at odd hours. He didn't interrogate. He listened, asked harmless questions, complained about road closures, mentioned the warehouses offhandedly. Most drivers shrugged. A few went quiet. One older man stared into his coffee too long and muttered, "That area ain't empty like people think." Another said, "Sometimes what's missing matters more than what's there." Then there were the looks. The kind men give when they know something but won't say it out loud. When silence is learned, not chosen. Benny noticed patterns. Certain rigs came through in loose clusters. Different companies. Different plates. But always late. Always moving through town without stopping long. Always the same direction. Convoys without labels. On his third night digging, he walked the route Teresa had taken, past the clinic, behind the warehouses. The fog was gone, replaced by daylight and dust. Still no blood. No shell casing. No sign anything violent had ever happened. Until he noticed the door. Behind the clinic staff entrance, tucked just out of view, someone had taped a small scrap of paper at eye level. It fluttered in the breeze, deliberate. Waiting. Benny pulled it free. The handwriting was jagged. Rushed. But clear. "The convoy is safe because of her." He read it twice. Then a third time. This wasn't gratitude left by a stranger. It wasn't random kindness. It was a message meant for someone who knew where to look. Someone who was watching. Benny folded the paper carefully and went straight to the hospital. As he reached Teresa's floor, he slowed. Two men stood near her room. They weren't staff. That much was obvious. No badges. No charts. No idle scrolling on phones. One leaned casually against the wall, hands clasped in front of him. The other stood by a vending machine without buying anything. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their posture was unmistakable. Shoulders back. Weight balanced. Stillness that came from discipline, not boredom. Their forearms bore faded ink, numbers, unit insignias, symbols time hadn't erased. Veterans. They glanced at Benny as he passed. Not suspicious. Not hostile. Aware. Inside the room, Teresa read the note in silence. Her fingers trembled slightly as she handed it back. That wasn't meant to scare me, she said. That was meant to reassure someone. Benny nodded. Or warn them. That night, just after visiting hours ended, a man Teresa had never seen before stepped into her room. Mid-50s. Grease-stained jacket. Limp in his stride. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't pull up a chair. He's alive, the man said quietly. The cargo made it through. Then he left. No explanation. No name. Just enough truth to shift the ground beneath her. The next day, Benny followed the thread further. It led him to a place he'd driven past for years without noticing, a veterans bar just outside town. Rusted sign. Dim windows. Trucks parked with military precision. Inside, the air was thick with old wood and older memories. Photos lined the walls. Men sat in silence that wasn't awkward. It was practiced. Benny showed the note to the bartender. The man stopped wiping the glass. He nodded once and pointed to a booth in the back. Curtis sat there alone, laying out cards he never finished dealing. Silver hair. Clear eyes. The kind that had seen too much and learned not to flinch. You don't ask questions like this unless you've already crossed a line, Curtis said after reading the note. So I'll say this once. He leaned forward. The man your friend protected wasn't just wounded, he said. He was carrying proof. A ledger. Names. Dates. Shell companies. Routes. Contracts buried under layers of bureaucracy. Evidence tying corrupt contractors and smugglers to the systematic exploitation of veterans. Men promised work, benefits, or protection, then trapped in debt, forced labor, or silence. Men who spoke up vanished. Men who didn't comply were ruined. And men who tried to expose it were hunted. That convoy. Curtis continued. It's not about politics. It's about extraction. Getting people and information out before the system eats them. Benny swallowed. And Teresa? Curtis didn't hesitate. She didn't save a man, he said. She saved the mission. Back at the hospital, Teresa noticed the shift before anyone said a word. The smiles were still polite, but now there was respect beneath them. Staff didn't linger as long. Visitors passed her door with careful glances. The men in the hallway changed, but they never disappeared. Always watching. Not guarding her from the outside world. Guarding the truth from being buried again. She understood then why no one had threatened her. Why no one had told her to stop talking. They didn't need to. Because the people who needed protecting were already moving. And the people who needed erasing preferred to stay invisible. The villain wasn't a single man with a gun. It was a network. Contractors hiding behind paperwork. Smugglers laundering crimes through logistics. Executives who never pulled triggers but ordered outcomes. People who made money off broken soldiers. People who killed to stay unseen. Teresa lay back against the pillow, the weight of it all pressing in. Not fear, but clarity. She hadn't been crazy. She hadn't imagined anything. She had stepped into a war she didn't know was happening. And by surviving, she had become something dangerous. A witness. If you can't stand people who exploit veterans and then erase witnesses, type no more silence. Because silence is how they stay invisible. By the fifth morning, Teresa could tell the hospital had decided what she was. Not officially. Not on paper. But in the way people spoke around her now. They no longer asked her to remember. They asked her how she was feeling. They didn't challenge her story anymore. They simply avoided it. The incident had been sealed into something unspoken. Too strange, too complicated, too inconvenient. Her body was healing faster than her place in the world. The pain in her leg had dulled into a steady ache. Physical therapy had started. Nurses adjusted her bed without flinching now, without the careful pauses they used with fragile patients. She was no longer treated like someone broken,
Just misplaced.
That afternoon, the sky outside her window darkened without warning. Thick clouds rolled in low, heavy with rain. Thunder murmured somewhere distant, not loud enough to be dramatic, just present enough to remind you that something was coming. Teresa sat upright, flipping through the same magazine she hadn't read in days. Her mind kept circling the same thought. If the man lived, if the evidence made it through, then why did it feel like she was the only one standing still? The knock on the door was firm. Not rushed. Not tentative. It was the knock of someone who expected it to be answered. Before she could speak, the door opened. The man who stepped inside did not look like a hero. He wore a long tan coat that had seen weather. Work boots scuffed at the toes. His hair was steel gray, cut short, precise without being sharp. His posture filled the room instantly, not with authority that demanded attention, but with gravity. The room felt different the moment he entered. He closed the door behind him carefully. "Miss Williams," he said.
His voice was calm.
Low. Measured. She straightened instinctively. Yes. He didn't reach for a chair. Didn't glance at the monitors or charts. He stood at the foot of her bed, hands clasped loosely behind his back. "I'm Colonel Briggs," he said. "Retired." He paused, just long enough for the word to matter. "And unofficial," he added. Teresa's heart picked up. He wasn't there to ask questions. He was there to confirm answers. "You're not on any of the schedules," she said quietly. "No," he replied. "I wouldn't be." Silence settled between them. Not awkward, not heavy. Intentional. "You've been told many things since that night," he continued. "Most of them designed to make your life easier."
She almost laughed.
"And harder," she said. A flicker of something crossed his face. Approval, maybe. "I'm here to tell you what you weren't supposed to hear," Colonel Briggs said. "And then I'll leave." He stepped closer. "The man you protected survived." The words landed gently, but they carried weight. Teresa exhaled, a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for days. "He lived," she repeated. "He did," Briggs confirmed. He made it to the next transfer point. The evidence he carried was secured and verified. Her fingers tightened in the blanket. "What kind of evidence?" she asked. "The kind that saves lives," he replied. "And ends others, careers, operations, networks that thrive on silence." He didn't dramatize it.
Didn't need to.
"Because of what you did," he continued, "people who had no voice will be heard. Men who were disappearing quietly will stop disappearing." She swallowed. "And because of that," he said evenly, "your name will never appear anywhere official." There it was. No headline. No citation. No commendation ceremony. "No one will know?" she asked. "Everyone who needs to will," Briggs said. "And no one else." Teresa leaned back against the pillow. She felt strangely calm. Not disappointed. Not angry. Just aware. "Why me?" she asked after a moment. "Why tell me at all?" Colonel Briggs reached into his coat. He didn't pull out a folder. Or paperwork. Or anything that could be logged. He placed a small cloth patch on the bedside table. Dark fabric. Faded gold stitching. A winged wheel intersected by a rifle. Beneath it, a phrase stitched in careful thread, worn, but deliberate. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't pristine. It looked earned. "This," he said, "isn't a medal." She picked it up. The fabric was rough beneath her fingers. Real. "It's recognition," he continued, "but not the kind you display." She looked up at him. "You didn't sign up for this," Briggs said. "You didn't swear an oath. You didn't know what you were stepping into." "No," she said softly. "I didn't." But when the moment came, he said, "You didn't step away." Thunder rolled louder now, rain tapping against the window. "You're protected," he added. "Not watched." Protected. The distinction mattered. They won't come for you, he said. Because the mission moved forward. Because what you did worked. He straightened. That's the only thank you you'll ever receive, Colonel Briggs said. And the only one that matters. She held the patch tighter. What happens now? She asked. He paused at the door. You heal, he said. You live your life. And you carry the knowledge that when it counted, you acted. He opened the door. No one will ever ask you to explain this, he said without turning back. And no one will ever ask you to prove it. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut. The room felt smaller without him. Teresa sat in silence as the rain intensified, drumming against the glass. She turned the patch over in her hands again and again, tracing the stitching like a map she didn't fully understand. She thought of the deputy who hadn't believed her, the doctors who had smiled kindly, the co-workers who had looked away. She thought of the men in the hallway who never spoke. The shift was sudden and undeniable. She had been doubted. Now she was shielded. Not celebrated. Not displayed. But quietly, deliberately kept safe. She placed the patch back on the table, aligning it carefully, like something that deserved respect. Whatever she had stepped into that night, whatever invisible line she had crossed, it was no longer behind her. It was part of her. And for the first time since the gunshot cracked the fog, Teresa felt something close to peace. Subscribe if you believe real heroes don't chase recognition. They act when it's hardest. Because the people who matter will always know. Discharge day didn't feel like victory. It felt unfinished. The morning arrived gray and low, the sky hanging heavy with clouds that couldn't decide whether to break or hold. The kind of sky that presses down on you, not threatening, just watchful. Teresa woke early, long before the nurse came with paperwork and instructions she already knew by heart. Her leg ached differently now. Not sharp pain. Not panic pain. A deep, steady reminder that something had passed through her and left its mark. She swung her legs over the side of the bed slowly, careful. The cane leaned against the wall where someone had left it the night before. Plain metal. Unremarkable. She wrapped her hand around it and stood. For a moment, she just breathed. Hospitals have a way of erasing time. Days blur. Nights fold into mornings. But today had edges. Today had weight. The nurse who signed her release smiled, warm but distant, like someone saying goodbye to a patient they wouldn't see again. There were polite wishes. A clipboard exchanged hands. A final check of vitals.
No one mentioned the alley.
No one mentioned the bullet. No one mentioned the man who never existed. That chapter had been sealed shut. Benny waited near the exit, holding her jacket. He'd been quieter lately, not withdrawn, just thoughtful. Like someone who had seen something too large to explain easily. You ready? He asked. She nodded. They moved slowly down the hallway, past doors and faces, and the low murmur of a place designed to keep life moving forward. Automatic doors slid open, and cold air swept in. Teresa stepped outside.
And stopped.
The parking lot was full. Not chaotic. Not crowded. Ordered. 12 trucks stood lined up across the far end of the lot, parked with a precision that didn't happen by accident. Full-sized rigs. Long haulers. Each one different. Different colors, different companies, different scars of the road, but positioned shoulder to shoulder like they belonged together. Engines idled low, a steady, restrained rumble that vibrated through the ground and into her bones. In front of each truck stood a man.
12 of them.
They didn't move. They didn't speak. They stood at attention. To anyone else, they might have looked like truckers waiting for directions.
Jeans. Boots.
Canvas jackets. Worn caps pulled low. Ordinary men you'd pass at a gas station without a second glance. But Teresa saw what others wouldn't. The posture.
The stillness.
The way each man occupied space without wasting it. Veterans. She felt her breath catch. Benny whispered her name, unsure. Teresa? She took a step forward, the cane clicking softly against the pavement. The sound seemed loud in the silence. One man stepped out from the center. He was broad-shouldered, his work shirt buttoned to the collar, grease stains darkening the sleeves. His jaw was set, his face weathered by sun and years. On his forearm, partially hidden beneath rolled fabric, faded stripes marked time in a language only some could read. He stopped a few feet from her. For a moment, no one spoke. The wind shifted. A loose piece of paper skittered across the asphalt. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called. Then the man nodded once. "You didn't just save a man," he said. His voice was firm, controlled, carrying without needing to be raised. "You protected our brother's sacrifice." The words landed clean. No flourish. No drama. Teresa opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't trust her voice. Behind him, the other 11 men raised their hands. Not a dramatic salute. Not a show. A quiet one.
Low.
Steady. Respectful. It lasted only seconds. Then, as one, they dropped their hands. The engines deepened. Doors opened and closed with measured finality. One by one, the trucks pulled away from the line, turning onto the road without honking, without ceremony. Diesel engines faded into the distance like a heartbeat moving farther away, but still present, still real. Within moments, the parking lot was just a parking lot again. No crowd. No evidence. No witnesses who knew what they had seen. Benny let out a breath he'd been holding. "Did that just?" "Yes," Teresa said quietly. They stood there for a long moment after the last truck disappeared beyond the trees. The world resumed itself, without apology. A nurse walked past without looking twice. Somewhere, a door slammed. Life continued, unaware. That was the point. Teresa lowered herself onto a nearby bench, the cane resting across her knees. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. She hadn't needed applause. She hadn't needed her name spoken. She had needed to know. Now she did. She thought of the gunshot in the fog. The disbelief. The careful smiles. The pressure to forget. To move on. To doubt herself. The real enemy had never been the man with the gun. It was the system that thrived on silence. That depended on people looking away. That survived by convincing witnesses they were alone. That system lost something the night she stepped forward. Not because she was powerful. Not because she knew what she was doing. But because she refused to do nothing. Teresa stood, leaning on the cane, and took one last look at the empty stretch of asphalt where the trucks had been. The world hadn't noticed. But she had. And now, so had we. If you stand with people who do the right thing even when no one's watching, like this video and comment, "I stand for courage." Sharing this story helps make sure silence doesn't win. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoy stories told like a movie, click on subscribe for more powerful stories.